The bus rattled down the cracked road leading toward the military installation, its windows streaked with dust and the faint smell of diesel clinging to the stale air inside. The new recruits sat in silence, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Some clutched duffel bags tightly, as if holding on to the last pieces of home. Others tried to look brave, wearing smirks that fooled no one. Among them sat a young woman, her uniform neat, her boots still carrying the stiffness of new leather. Her eyes didn't wander like the others. She didn't press her face to the glass to glimpse the barbed wire fences drawing closer. She simply sat upright, her expression calm, as though she had been waiting for this moment far longer than anyone around her. Her silence was not nervousness, it was focus. Yet to those sitting nearby, it looked like uncertainty, even fear. When the bus hissed to a stop, the recruits scrambled to their feet, grabbing bags and stumbling down the narrow aisle. She was one of the last to stand, steady and unhurried. The hot afternoon sun hit them instantly as they stepped off the bus, the ground beneath their boots crunching with gravel. The smell of oil, dirt, and something metallic filled the air. The base loomed before them, long barracks lined in perfect rows, a training field stretching beyond them, and watchtowers standing, tall like silent guardians. A line of instructors stood waiting, arms crossed, faces unreadable. At the far end of the group stood the colonel himself, tall and rigid, his hat pulled low, eyes scanning the recruits with the detached sharpness of someone who had seen it all before. He didn't pause on her. His gaze swept past her the same way it passed over every other fresh face. To him, she was indistinguishable, a recruit like the rest, one destined to be sorted, trained, tested, and judged. If she failed, another would replace her. If she succeeded, she would still be just one among many. The instructors barked orders immediately. Line up, bags down, eyes forward. The recruits rushed into uneven rows, some fumbling with their duffels, others trying to stand tall. She moved with precision. Her bag dropped neatly at her side, shoulders squared, eyes straight ahead. No one noticed her discipline. The colonel's attention was drawn, instead, to two loud recruits in the front row who whispered and snickered, and to a boy who looked pale enough to faint. Listen carefully. One instructor shouted, his voice sharp enough to cut through the heavy air. You are no longer civilians. You belong to this base, to this training, to the service of your country. Your comfort is irrelevant. Your excuses mean nothing. From this day forward, every second you spend here will test you. Most of you will fail, and no one will care if you do. The words made some recruits shuffle nervously. She did not move. Her heartbeat quickened, but outwardly she was still. Introductions followed, quick, impersonal, the kind that reduced individuals into numbers, into positions on a chart. Each recruit gave a name, a state, a background if asked. Most stammered through theirs, voices too loud or too soft. When her turn came, she spoke clearly, but without flourish. Private First Class Daniels, Illinois. The instructor nodded and moved on without comment. No one reacted. She blended back into the line as if she hadn't spoken at all. For a moment, she caught the colonel's distant eyes flicker toward her, but they slid away again just as quickly. The recruits were marched across the grounds, bags in hand, to the barracks. Inside, the rooms were stark metal bunks, thin mattresses, a faint smell of disinfectant. The chatter of recruits filled the air as they claimed beds, some already, forming cliques, others sulking in silence. She set her bag neatly at the foot of an empty bunk in the corner, her movements methodical. Think she's gonna make it? One voice whispered nearby, not bothering to lower the tone enough to hide it. Doubt it, another replied. She looks too quiet, too soft. They didn't know she could hear every word. She didn't react, didn't turn to glare or defend herself. She simply unlaced her boots, setting them carefully beside her bed. Inside, however, a small ember of resolve burned hotter. Let them doubt. She had no need for their approval now. The evening rolled on with basic introductions, instructions about schedules, and the endless rules that would govern their lives. Lights out was strict, wake up even stricter. Instructors patrolled the halls with the intensity of guards in a prison. The colonel did not return to speak to them that night, but his shadow hung over the barracks, an unseen reminder that their every action was measured. Lying in bed, most recruits whispered anxiously in the dark, some already regretting their decision to enlist. She remained silent, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the colonel's expression when his eyes passed over her. He hadn't seen her yet, not truly. That was fine. She didn't want to be seen too soon. In her silence, she remembered the path that had brought her here. Long hours at the shooting range back home, practicing until her shoulders ached. The books she studied about tactics and discipline. The decision to enlist not as an escape, but as a challenge she owed herself. She wasn't here for recognition. She was here to prove something that words couldn't capture. By the time the lights clicked off, her resolve had only deepened. Around her, recruits shifted restlessly, trapped between exhaustion and fear. She closed her eyes, steady and unshaken. Tomorrow, the training would begin. Tomorrow, the doubts would grow louder. But she knew quietly, with unshakable certainty, that her silence would not last forever. And though no one saw it yet, the colonel had already made his first mistake. He hadn't noticed her. The first week broke many recruits before it had truly begun. Morning whistles pierced the barracks at 4:30 a.m., jerking everyone from restless dreams into a blur of boots, shouting, and aching muscles. By sunrise, they were already running. Laps across the training field, sweat soaking their uniforms. Some gasped for breath, others cursed under their breath, but no one dared slow down. She ran among them, her stride measured and her expression unreadable. Her heart pounded, but her pace never faltered. She didn't try to be first, nor did she allow herself to drift to the back. She stayed steady, deliberate, each step a quiet defiance against the fatigue clawing at her lungs. Around her, the whispers began. "She's too slow," one recruit muttered, though his own chest heaved harder than hers. "She won't last. Look at her, barely talks to anyone." It didn't take long for a nickname to spread, silent. Some said it mockingly, others said it with a hint of unease, but either way, the word stuck. She heard it, but never responded. She simply focused on keeping her feet moving, her mind locked on the rhythm of her breathing. By the third day, training intensified. Obstacle courses turned into punishing gauntlets, high walls to scale, mud pits to crawl through, ropes that shredded palms raw. Her first attempt at the climbing wall ended in a slip. She fell back into the dirt, landing on her shoulder. Laughter broke out immediately. "Told you she's not cut out for this." Someone jeered. She stood up without a word, brushing the mud from her sleeve. She tried again, arms burning, muscles trembling, and this time she reached the top. She didn't raise her fists in victory or gloat. She simply climbed down, quiet, and moved to the next challenge. The colonel, who had come to observe silently from the sidelines, noticed the laughter more than her success. His eyes narrowed at the undisciplined noise among the recruits. He scribbled something on his notepad, but didn't glance her way again. That night, the barracks buzzed with conversation. Groups clustered in corners, swapping stories about home or speculating about the weeks ahead. She sat on her bunk, cleaning her boots with deliberate care. Two recruits across the room whispered loudly enough for her to hear. "Bet she washes. Out by the end of the month. Maybe sooner. She's too soft. Doesn't even look like she wants to be here." She paused for a moment, her hand still on the brush. A flicker of anger surged in her chest, but she forced it down. She wouldn't waste energy on words. Instead, she polished her boots until the leather gleamed under the dim lights. Her silence a sharper answer than anything she could have spoken. The next morning, drills pushed them to the edge. Rifle handling was introduced, and many struggled with the weight and recoil. She held hers with a steadiness that drew no attention at first. It was too subtle, too quiet. Her aim was careful, her posture disciplined, but the instructors were busy correcting the loud mistakes of others. When her bullets clustered close to the target's center, no one clapped, no one muttered approval. The colonel watched from a distance, his arms folded. He marked her performance as competent, nothing more. Yet not everyone ignored her. A recruit named Morales, broad-shouldered and always smiling, noticed the consistency of her movements. During breaks, he glanced her way with curiosity rather than mockery. "You don't talk much, do you?" he asked one afternoon, half grinning. She only shrugged, her expression unreadable. Morales chuckled. "That's fine. Talking doesn't win wars anyway." It was the closest thing to kindness she had received since arriving. Still, she didn't open up. Trust was not something she gave easily, and in a place where weakness was exploited, silence felt safer than words. But silence had its price. The recruits' doubts grew louder in the shadows. They whispered during meals, their voices low but sharp enough to cut. "She's holding us back. She got lucky on the wall, that's all. She's just waiting to quit. You'll see." Each comment chipped away at her isolation, but rather than break her, it forged something stronger. At night, while others collapsed onto their bunks, she quietly did extra push-ups beside her bed. Her arms shook, her muscles screamed, but she pushed through until her body refused to move. No one saw. No one knew. The colonel walked the training grounds often at dusk, hands clasped behind his back, scanning the base with a predator's patience. Once, he passed by the barracks window and glimpsed her silhouette, moving in the half-dark, her body rising and falling in steady rhythm. He paused but said nothing, moving on without a word. She didn't know he had seen. He didn't know why. The image lingered in his mind. By the end of the week, her reputation was set in stone among the recruits. She was silent. The one Waho didn't belong, the one they expected to crack first. The whispers followed her everywhere at meals. In the field, even in the shower halls where steam carried their cruel laughter. But while their words grew sharper, her silence grew heavier, stronger, like armor. They thought she didn't hear. She heard everything. They thought she didn't feel. She felt it all. But she refused to give them what they wanted: a crack, a slip, a single sign that she was breaking. Instead, she carried the whispers with her into every drill, every march, every exhausting climb. Each insult was fuel, each laugh a weight she used to sharpen her resolve. And though no one realized it, yet not the recruits who mocked her, not the instructors who overlooked her, not even the colonel who dismissed her, her silence was not weakness. It was patience. And patience was about to become her deadliest weapon. The second week stripped away whatever illusions the recruits still carried about military life. Comfort was no longer a memory, it became a myth. Sleep was a privilege stolen in fragments. Meals were swallowed in haste, and every inch of their bodies ached from punishment disguised as training. Each morning, before the horizon had even thought of light, the shrill whistle pierced the barracks. Recruits stumbled from bunks, eyes half shut, muscles screaming. She was always one of the first to rise, her bed made with mechanical precision, boots laced tight, duffel aligned perfectly by regulation. To others, this ritual seemed obsessive. To her, it was survival. Order in small things meant strength for the battles ahead. Outside, the field stretched wide and merciless. Running was constant. 5 miles became 7, 7 became 10. Mud soaked their uniforms, blisters tore their feet raw, but she never broke her stride. Her face remained expressionless, even when her chest burned with fire. A few recruits began noticing. She wasn't the fastest, never the first across the finish line, but she was the one who never stopped. The obstacle course grew into their greatest torment. Wooden walls taller than men, ropes frayed from endless hands, barbed wire stretched. Over crawling mud pits, each piece designed not just to test muscle, but to test will. Many cursed under their breath when faced with the walls again, some with dread written plain on their faces. She approached them differently. Each wall, each pit, each rope was not a punishment, but a problem to be solved. On her second attempt, at the high wall, she studied the grain of the wood, felt where her boots could grip, and adjusted her approach. She didn't leap blindly. She planned, then executed. Her palms blistered, her shoulders burned, but when she pulled herself over, she landed with quiet certainty. The whispers still came, of course. She's slow. She won't keep up forever. But whispers began losing confidence. Those same voices sometimes gasped for air as she jogged past them in silence, her boots hitting the ground with relentless rhythm. Weapons training consumed their afternoons. The air at the range reeked of oil, metal, and cordite. Many recruits fired with jerks and flinches, their shots scattered. She approached the rifle like an old companion, each movement deliberate. Load, shoulder, breath, fire. Her bullets carved tight groups into the targets, close enough that instructors raised eyebrows, but never said a word. They were too busy correcting loud mistakes, leaving her quiet successes unnoticed. Still, some recruits did notice. Morales, the broad-shouldered joker, kept watching her. During one break, he leaned against a bench, grinning. "You don't miss much, do you?" She simply shrugged, setting another clip into place. "Guess that's your thing," he said. Silent, steady, dangerous. For once, she allowed the faintest smile to flicker across her lips. It was gone in a second, but Morales caught it. Physical drills turned brutal by the third week. Instructors barked for endless push-ups, planks until arms trembled, squats until legs quaked. Many recruits collapsed, groaning in exhaustion. She didn't collapse. Her body shook, her muscles screamed, but she pushed until the instructors barked enough. Then, when no one watched, she pushed again, small sets in the barracks, extra climbs on the ropes, sit-ups in the dark after lights out. The colonel had a way of appearing without sound. He'd stand at the edge of the training fields, arms behind his back, eyes hidden beneath the brim of his cap. He rarely spoke, rarely interfered. He simply watched, jotting notes in his small black book. Most recruits feared his presence, trying harder whenever they spotted him. She, however, never looked up. Her focus never shifted, not even when she could feel his eyes. One evening, as the recruits stumbled back toward the barracks, after a grueling 10-mile run, the colonel's gaze lingered on her. She wasn't the first to finish, nor the last. She came in steady, posture intact, breathing controlled, no theatrics, no collapse into the dirt, just discipline. He wrote something in his notebook, a small frown tugging at his lips. Inside the barracks, whispers persisted, but their tone had changed. "She's weird," one muttered. "Yeah, but she doesn't quit." "Did you see her at the rope climb?" Just kept going. It wasn't respect yet, not admiration, but it was no longer outright mockery. By the fourth week, exhaustion had stripped away bravado. Recruits who had been loud and arrogant grew quiet, their bodies betraying them. She, on the other hand, seemed carved sharper by every test. Her frame grew leaner, her movements more precise. The fire in her silence burned brighter, even if no one could name it. During a stormy night, thunder rattled the windows of the barracks. Recruits groaned when the whistle blew at 4:30 anyway. Outside, rain hammered the ground, turning the field into a swamp. They were ordered to crawl through mud under barbed wire, lightning splitting the sky above them. Many cursed and slipped, faces smeared with muck. She pressed forward, mud in her hair, rain stinging her eyes. The world narrowed to inches, the wire above, the mud below, the sound of her own breath. When she emerged at the end, soaked and filthy, she stood taller than she had before. The storm had not beaten her, it had baptized her. That night, whispers were quieter. The nickname Silent no longer sounded knocking, it carried something else. Caution, recognition. Morale sat on the bunk across from her, shaking his head with a grin. You know, you're starting to scare people. She looked up briefly, then returned to cleaning her rifle. Don't worry, he added. It's a good kind of scared. She didn't answer, but for the first time, she felt the shift. They still doubted her, but less with every passing day. And somewhere, in his office lit only by a desk lamp, the colonel flipped through his notebook. He paused on the page with her name. His notes were sparse at first, competent, quiet, steady. But after today, he added one more word, underlined once, unbreakable. The colonel had walked the training fields for years, his boots leaving countless prints on the gravel paths that wound between the ranges and obstacle courses. To most recruits, he was less a man and more a myth, stern, unreadable, and dangerous. In his silence, his presence always sent a ripple through the field backs straightened, hands moved sharper, and eyes flicked nervously toward him. But to him, recruits were all the same. Eager faces, nervous hands, voices shaking in their first weeks. Some thought themselves warriors already. Some broke at the first sign of strain. He had learned to stop caring about individuals until the training carved them into something more. That was why, at first, he barely saw her. On the day of the live fire drill, the air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder. The sun burned overhead, casting long shadows across the firing line, where recruits stood in nervous anticipation. Their rifles gleamed in the light, freshly oiled but awkward in untested hands. The range stretched far ahead, wooden silhouettes standing as silent adversaries. Load, the instructor barked. Metal clicked and clattered as magazines slid into place. The colonel stood behind the line, his notebook tucked under one arm, his eyes scanning the recruits like a hawk circling over prey. Ready. Rifles rose, some with trembling grips, others with false confidence. Fire! The range erupted in thunder. Bullets cracked through the air, some slamming into targets, others kicking up dirt or missing altogether. The colonel's expression never changed. He had seen it all before: the panic of first shots, the flinch of shoulders, the careless jerks of the trigger. Then his eyes landed on her. At first, there was nothing remarkable. She stood at her post, posture textbook perfect, her face calm. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried, as if she had practiced them 100 times before. While others fired too fast or hesitated too long, she controlled her rhythm. One shot, breath. Another shot, breath. He leaned slightly forward, studying her through narrowed eyes. Her bullets struck with quiet consistency, each round punching into the paper silhouette's chest or center mass. Not flashy, not extraordinary, but precise, reliable. It was the reliability that made him pause. Most recruits were erratic this early. She wasn't. Still, he forced his gaze away. A few clean shots didn't make a soldier. He'd seen recruits who shined early collapse when pressure mounted. Steadiness at the range meant nothing on the battlefield. The drill ended with shouted orders. Cease fire. Clear weapons. The recruits fumbled with safeties and ejection, some relieved, others frustrated. She lowered her rifle smoothly, checked the chamber, and set it down with practiced calm. The colonel wrote a single word in his notebook: consistent. He didn't underline it. He didn't add more. For now, that was all she was. The next day, training returned to brutality. Recruits were marched to exhaustion, their arms and legs strained by endless repetitions. The colonel observed from a distance, arms crossed, expression cold. His gaze flicked toward the ones who collapsed, the ones who cursed, the ones who looked ready to quit, and then again toward her. She wasn't the strongest. She wasn't the fastest, but she was steady. Always steady. Her uniform was soaked, her breath ragged, her body shaking, but she refused to stop. He noticed how she never glanced toward him, never sought approval. Many recruits, when they knew he was watching, straightened their spines and put on a performance. She didn't. Her eyes stayed forward, her focus inward, as if the colonel's judgment didn't exist at all. That made him watch longer than he intended. At the range a week later, the colonel decided to test something. He instructed the recruits to fire in timed bursts fast shooting, 5 rounds in 10 seconds. It was designed to expose panic, too. Unravel the careful control that some recruits managed with slower firing. The line readied. At the command, rifles barked in unison. Chaos erupted. Shots went wide. Bullets chewed the dirt. Paper silhouettes tore in random places. He scanned down the line, ready to mark failures. Then his eyes caught her again. Her rifle moved with discipline. No wasted motion, no panic. Her shots landed in a cluster near the silhouette's chest, each one deliberate even under the timer. The grouping wasn't perfect. Few could manage that under speed, but it was tighter than most, tighter than he expected. His jaw tightened, though his face revealed nothing to the recruits. He wrote in his notebook again, controlled under pressure. That night, alone in his office, he flipped through his notes. Most names had marks of failure: unsteady, weak grip, poor control. A few had cautious praise. Her name, however, stood out. The colonel stared at it for a long moment before closing the book. She was beginning to bother him. A colonel prided himself on being impossible to impress. Talent was cheap. Determination was rarer, but still not enough. Only the combination talent forged by relentless discipline produced soldiers worth his attention. When he passed the barracks at dusk, he sometimes glimpsed her shadow moving in the window. While others rested, she worked push-ups, sit-ups, stretching until her body trembled. He never spoke, never entered, but he noticed. And against his better judgment, he began to wonder. 2 days later, another live fire drill was scheduled. This time, the targets were moving wooden silhouettes on rails that slid side to side. Many recruits groaned when they saw them. Moving targets exposed flaws ruthlessly. The colonel stood close this time, his arms crossed tightly, his expression carved from stone. He was watching for cracks, for the moment when each recruit's limits were laid bare. When her turn came, she stepped forward without hesitation. Her eyes locked onto the shifting silhouette, her rifle rising steady as ever. Fire. Her first shot struck near the center, the silhouette jolting backward. She tracked it as it moved, breathing evenly, firing again. The second round landed close to the first, tighter than most could manage. The colonel froze, not outwardly, not in a way anyone else would see, but deep inside. For a moment, he saw not a recruit. He saw a soldier. He caught himself, his jaw tightening. It was too soon for conclusions. He wouldn't make the mistake of assuming promise equaled potential. But he could no longer dismiss her as forgettable. When the drill ended, he shut his notebook without writing a word. Not because she had failed, because he didn't yet know what to call what he'd seen. For the first time in years, a recruit had unsettled him. That night, as rain pattered softly against his office windows, the colonel sat with the lamp casting, a pool of light over his desk. His notebook lay open, blank on the page where her name should have been updated. His pen hovered. He thought of her silence, her steadiness, her precision. He thought of how she didn't seek attention, didn't falter when eyes were on her. Finally, he wrote one word, watch, and underlined it twice. The air on the training grounds carried a different weight that morning. It wasn't just the chill that swept in with the wind, tugging at uniforms and rattling the tin roofs of the sheds. It was the silence, the anticipation that seemed to hang heavy over the recruits as they were marched toward the firing range. Word had spread. Today's drill would be different. For weeks, they had fired at stationary targets clean, predictable silhouettes that absorbed bullets without resistance. But the colonel had grown tired of watching mediocrity. He had designed something harsher, something meant to crush fragile confidence. At the far end of the range, recruits stopped in their tracks when they saw it. Rows of targets stretched before them, but these were not the still paper cutouts they had grown used to. Instead, steel frames stood tall, and wooden silhouettes mounted on rails shifted unpredictably from side to side. Some moved slowly, others jerked sharply, testing not just accuracy but timing. And in the middle row, 2 targets, side by side, sliding in opposite directions. Even seasoned soldiers found those difficult. For recruits, it was a gauntlet. A low murmur rippled through the line. You've got to be kidding me. I can barely hit the standing ones. They're gonna slaughter us out here. The colonel stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back, his boots striking the concrete with authority. His gaze swept over them like a blade. War does not wait for you to steady your hand. The enemy does not stand still. If you cannot control your weapon under pressure, you are nothing but dead weight to those beside you. His voice cut like iron, and silence fell. You will step forward one at a time. You will face the targets, and you will fire until the magazine is empty. Fail to strike, and you will repeat until you learn. There are no excuses. The line shuffled nervously. Sweat gathered on brows despite the cool air. Some tried to steel themselves with deep breaths. Others whispered prayers under their breath. At the far end of the line, she stood as she always did, quiet, expression unreadable, rifle slung across her chest. She didn't fidget, didn't whisper. She only watched the targets, her eyes sharp, as if she were already solving the problem. In her mind, the first recruit stepped forward. His hands shook as he raised the rifle. The colonel gave the order. Fire. The targets moved. Shots rang out in desperate succession, but most went wide, bullets sparking off the steel frames, or vanishing into the dirt. The recruit cursed under his breath, struggling to track the erratic movements. When the magazine clicked empty, his target had only one bullet hole in the corner. Pathetic, the instructor snapped. Reset. The recruit slunk back into, lying, face flushed with shame. One by one, others tried. Some managed a few hits, but most failed miserably. The colonel remained silent, arms folded, his expression carved from stone. Each miss confirmed his belief. Most were not ready. Most never would be. And then her name was called. The whispers began immediately. She's done for. No? Way she hits those. She barely says a word. Watch her choke now. The colonel heard the whispers too. He didn't silence them. Sometimes mockery was its own kind of test. She stepped forward, rifle in hand, her boots steady on the gravel. Her face betrayed nothing, no fear, no arrogance. She slid the magazine into place, the click of metal crisp and confident. The colonel's eyes narrowed. Her movements were precise. Not hurried, not hesitant. Just exact. He gave the command, "Fire." The world seemed to shrink for her. The recruits faded. The colonel faded. Even the instructors were gone. Only the targets remained, sliding side to side, challenging her with every movement. Her breath slowed. Her grip steadied. The rifle barked. The first bullet struck the left target clean through the chest. She didn't pause. She tracked the second target as it slid in the opposite direction, adjusting her aim with a smooth shift. Another shot. Another hit. Murmurs rippled behind. Her. "Did you see that? Lucky shot." She fired again. And again. Each bullet landed close to the center, the steel silhouettes shuddering with every strike. Her rhythm was unbroken. Exhale, squeeze, reset. The chaos of movement meant nothing to her. It was just a puzzle, and she was solving it piece by piece. The colonel's arms lowered. His jaw clenched, though he hid the reaction behind a mask of discipline. He had expected hesitation, flinching, panic. What he saw instead was composure, control. Then came the moment that froze him. Two targets crossed paths in front of her, sliding in opposite directions. Recruits often missed both in that instant, their focus broken. She didn't hesitate. She fired one round. The bullet tore through the shoulder of the first target and ricocheted, striking the second. Two targets. One shot. Silence engulfed the range. The recruits gaped, eyes wide, their whispers forgotten. Even the instructors stared, momentarily. Stunned, the colonel felt the breath catch in his throat. His pen nearly slipped from his hand. He had seen skilled shots before. He had seen precision, discipline, luck. But this was different. This was something rare, something dangerous. She lowered her rifle slowly, her eyes still locked on the now still silhouettes. Her expression didn't change. No pride, no smirk. No sign of triumph. She simply waited for the next command, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The colonel forced his mask back into place, though inside his thoughts churned. He couldn't dismiss this as luck, not with the control she had shown leading up to it. And yet, he refused to let awe cloud his judgment. Still, when he opened his notebook, his hand lingered longer than usual over her name. He wrote two words, exceptional control. Then, after a pause, he added, potential leader. The line shifted uneasily as she stepped back into place. Recruits who once mocked her avoided her eyes now. Morales, watching from 2 spots down, shook. His head slowly, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You just shut them all up," he whispered when she passed. She gave no reply, but in her silence, everyone felt the weight of what had happened. The colonel dismissed the group with his usual sharpness, but his voice carried a new undercurrent, a tightness, a restrained edge. The recruits didn't notice. She didn't seem to notice. But the colonel knew. Something had shifted. She was no longer invisible, no longer forgettable. And for the first time in years, the colonel felt the stirrings of something he thought long gone. Surprise. That night, the whispers in the barracks carried a new tone. Did you see it? She hit both with one shot. No one else could have done that. The nickname Silent didn't sound mocking anymore. It sounded reverent. She sat on her bunk, cleaning her rifle in the dim light, her movements slow and deliberate. Around her, recruits stole glances but said nothing aloud. She didn't look up. She didn't need their words. She had let her shot speak for her, and it had spoken louder than anything she could have said. In his office, the colonel sat long after lights out, the notebook open on his desk. He stared at her name, the new words he had written beneath it. He tapped his pen against the page, unsettled. He had underestimated her, badly. And now, he couldn't stop wondering. If this was what she could do as a recruit, What would she become when fully trained? The colonel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. For the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of curiosity pressing against discipline. He would watch her closely, because something told him this was only the beginning. The colonel believed in pressure, not the kind that made men sweat through their uniforms, but the kind that broke bones, pride, and illusions. To him, a soldier who could not perform under impossible odds was already lost. That belief shaped the next test. It was a rare morning when the range felt alive. The recruits lined up earlier than usual, whispering about the rumor that had already spread through the barracks. Today's drill would be decisive. The instructors had been quieter than usual, the air more tense. Everyone felt the colonel's unseen hand shaping what was about to come. At the far end of the range, a new challenge awaited. This time, it wasn't just moving targets. It was chaos. Steel silhouettes were set at staggering distances, some near, some far. A few jerked sideways on tracks. Others rose suddenly from the ground, triggered by hidden levers. And scattered among them were no target silhouettes marked with red. Bands that, if hit, counted as failures. The colonel watched the recruits' faces pale. He spoke with that cold precision that froze the air around him. War does not wait for perfect conditions. You will face unpredictability. You will face distraction. You will be punished for hesitation and destroyed by recklessness. Today, you learn the difference. He paused, letting the silence drive the fear deeper. You each have one magazine, 30 rounds. Every shot counts. You miss, you learn. You hesitate, you lose. You hit the wrong target. He let the words hang, his gaze sweeping over them. Then you might as well not exist. The recruits shifted nervously, their boots crunching against the gravel. Morales whispered. Under his breath, "This is going to eat us alive." The colonel heard him. He didn't correct him. He wanted them to know the truth. One by one, recruits stepped forward. The first stumbled almost immediately. His first 2 shots missed the moving silhouette entirely. Panic drove him to fire wildly, and one stray round struck a red marked. No target. The colonel said nothing, but his silence was louder than a shout. The second recruit fared little better. She hit some targets, missed many more. By the end, her 30 rounds had scattered dust more than steel. The third recruit managed some control, but his rhythm broke when 2 targets rose at once. He froze. For a second too long, and by then, his chance was gone. Failure piled on failure. The recruits watching from the line felt the dread sinking into their bones. Their hands tightened on their rifles, their breaths shallow. Every miss seemed to make the next shooter shakier. The colonel remained still, arms behind his back, eyes sharp. Inside, he was taking note. He was carving into memory the names of those who could never be trusted when the real fire came. And then her name was called. The whispers surged again. She won't pull it off this time. Not against that setup. Yeah, she got lucky last time. This'll break her. The colonel said nothing, though his ears caught every word. He wanted to see what she would do, with the weight of doubt pressing down on her shoulders. She stepped forward with her usual calm. Her boots struck steady against the concrete as she approached the firing line. The rifle felt familiar in her hands, almost like an extension of herself. The colonel watched closely. Her face was unreadable. No tension in her jaw. No darting eyes. Only that same measured silence. Fire. The range came alive. 2 silhouettes rose suddenly on the left. She swung her rifle, exhaled, and squeezed. 2 rounds, 2 hits. The steel clanged as they dropped. Before the echoes faded, a target jerked sideways on the far right. She shifted smoothly, firing again. Another strike. The recruits behind her stared, mouths open. She's actually hitting them. She's not even rushing. But she wasn't rushing. She was flowing. Each movement bled into the next, her body moving as though she had rehearsed this exact sequence in her mind 1,000 times. Her rifle cracked again, a sharp rhythm that cut through the chaos. Left, right, near, far, every shot deliberate. The colonel felt something stir inside him. He had trained marksmen, tested sharpshooters. He had seen talent before. But this was not just talent. This was instinct married to discipline, precision fused with control. Then came the test within the test. At the far end of the range, two silhouettes rose at once. One marked in black, one in red. They moved opposite directions, crossing paths. It was a trap designed to bait recruits into shooting wrong in the chaos. Gasps escaped from the line. She hit the red one. Everyone does. The colonel leaned forward slightly. His eyes locked on her, unblinking. Her breathing slowed. Her rifle steadied. One shot cracked. The black-marked silhouette dropped. The red one stood untouched. A hush fell over the range. The colonel's jaw tightened. His heart gave the faintest of jolts. She had seen through the trap. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't invaded. And then it happened. As the test neared its end, the final sequence triggered. A target at medium range jerked upward, while another slid across the far right. The recruits braced, expecting her to falter. She raised her rifle, eyes tracking both. For a heartbeat, she stood perfectly still, caught between them. Then she fired once. The bullet split through the air, striking the first target clean. It punched through the wooden chest and, by sheer calculation or something more ricocheted, tearing into the far target's edge. Two targets. One shot. Again. The silence afterward was heavier than any gunfire. Even the wind seemed to pause. The recruits gaped. Morales muttered, almost reverent, "That's impossible." The colonel froze. His face betrayed nothing, but inside, his thoughts roared. He had designed this drill to break them, to break her. But she had turned it into something else entirely. When the last casing hit the ground, she lowered her rifle. Calm, silent, as though nothing had happened. The colonel's pen hovered over his notebook, but for the first time, he could not bring himself to write. What words could he put down? Exceptional? Unbelievable? None felt right, because what he had just seen was something beyond measure. The recruits buzzed as she stepped back in line. The whispers carried a different tone now, not mockery, but awe. She did it again. She's not normal. She's something else. But she ignored them. She only checked her rifle, wiped the dust from the barrel, and waited. The colonel dismissed the group, his voice sharp, but his eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. He hated the feeling. It was not admiration, not yet, but it was something dangerously close. He had underestimated her. He had doubted her. And now, in one shot, she had forced him to confront the truth. This recruit was no longer just a recruit. She was something far greater. And the colonel knew deep down that he would never look at her the same way again. The colonel had faced battlefields that reeked of blood and smoke. He had stood in deserts where the sun burned mercilessly and in forests where silence felt like a predator. He had seen soldiers die bravely, and he had seen them collapse under the smallest weight of fear. Yet nothing unsettled him more than the quiet image of her lowering her rifle after that impossible shot. For days afterward, he carried the memory like an unwelcome burden. The recruits carried it too. In the mess hall, voices dropped to whispers when she walked in. The same men and women who once mocked her silence now gave her a wide berth, sneaking. glances that mixed awe with uncertainty. She had shifted from ghost to legend in a single afternoon. Morales, the one who had once teased her relentlessly, now sat near her with a strange protective energy, as if by proximity alone he could absorb some of what she carried. But she never spoke of it. She ate quietly, trained quietly, and moved through the days with the same calm rhythm. If she noticed the whispers, she didn't acknowledge them. If she felt the weight of eyes, she didn't flinch. She was the same as before, though the world around her had changed, and the colonel hated that it bothered him. In his office, the notebook lay open on his desk, the lamp's glow illuminating page after page of evaluations. Lines of ink carved his opinions into permanence. Weak grip, sloppy aim, coward under stress. Notes of failure he had seen 1,000 times. But on the page with her name, his words stopped short. Exceptional control. Potential leader. He stared at those phrases until his jaw clenched. He wanted to add more, but every attempt felt inadequate. How did one describe the moment when a recruit defied expectation so completely it rattled the very foundation of judgment? The colonel prided himself on seeing through masks. He could look at a recruit and predict their limit within days. But with her, every prediction he had made crumbled, and that terrified him more than he cared to admit. At night, sleep eluded him. He replayed the shot in his mind, each frame etched in brutal clarity. Her steady posture, her calm breath, the crack of the rifle, the impossible ricochet that struck 2 targets at once. It wasn't luck. He had seen luck on the battlefield. It was messy, desperate, never this clean. This had been something else, something deliberate, and it left him with a question that gnawed at him like rotten wood. What was she capable of becoming? The dilemma was not just personal pride. It was authority. If he acknowledged her skill, if he raised her above the others, what message would that send? That one recruit could rise so fast, while the rest slogged through mediocrity. It could inspire them, or it could fracture the fragile unity of the group. Worse, it could make him look weak. The colonel had spent years crafting his reputation. He was the immovable law, the unshakable hand of discipline. To admit he had underestimated a recruit would be to admit he was not infallible. And soldiers did not follow a man who doubted himself. But the alternative gnawed at him too. To ignore her potential would be to waste it. To bury it under the same drills and lectures as the others would be a sin against everything he believed about forging warriors. The dilemma clawed at him, each thought pulling him in opposite directions. He tested her again. Obstacle courses designed to exhaust every ounce of strength. She endured. Night drills that forced recruits to fire under flickering lights and disorienting sounds. She adapted. Surprise inspections that rattled the others into mistakes. She stood ready. Every attempt to find her weakness ended the same, with silence, steadiness, and results that exceeded expectation. The colonel's frustration grew. He wanted her to falter, not because he wished her failure, but because failure was familiar. Failure made sense. But she refused to give him that comfort. One evening, after the recruits had been dismissed, the colonel lingered by the range. The sun had set, leaving only the dim orange glow of lamps along the path. He heard the faint crack of a rifle and turned. She was there, alone. Her silhouette stood firm at the firing line, her rifle raised against the darkness. Targets barely visible in the fading light. Shot after shot rang out, each one precise, each one steady. She wasn't required to be there. No one had ordered her. The colonel watched from the shadows, unseen. For a long time, he said nothing. He simply listened to the rhythm of her shots and the silence between them. And for the first time, he felt something dangerously close to admiration. But he crushed it quickly. Admiration made leaders soft. Back in his quarters, he poured himself a glass of water, staring at his reflection in the dark window. His face was hard, lined by years of command, his eyes tired but sharp. He had always believed that soldiers were built, not born, that the crucible of training shaped them into something more. But what if he was wrong? What if, standing on his range, was proof that some soldiers were born already sharpened, already forged, waiting only for the battlefield to reveal them? The thought unsettled him. Because if she was born for this, then what was his role? A witness? A stepping stone? The colonel did not like the idea of being irrelevant. The recruits whispered more each day. Stories of her impossible shot grew in detail, exaggerated by tongues eager to turn truth into legend. Some claimed she hit 3 targets with 1 round. Others swore she never missed a shot, even in her sleep. Legends were dangerous. They inspired, but they also divided. The colonel knew he had to act. Either he would harness this fire, or it would burn the fragile balance of his unit. His dilemma deepened. To lift her up risked undermining his authority. To suppress her risked wasting the kind of talent that appeared once in a generation. And so, late one night, with the barracks quiet and the world outside cloaked in silence, he opened his notebook again. His pen hovered over her name. His hand trembled just slightly, but enough for him to notice. Finally, he wrote 3 words. She changes everything. When the ink dried, the colonel leaned back, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He knew then that no matter what choice he made, nothing about his command would ever be the same again. She had forced his hand. She had forced him to see. And in that moment, the colonel realized something both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in years, he was not the most dangerous presence on his own range. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of drills, sweat, and endless repetition. For most recruits, nothing had changed push-ups on gravel until their arms shook, rifles pressed into their shoulders until bruises blossomed. The colonel's voice cutting through dawn like a blade. But for her, everything had shifted. Not because she said so. She never boasted, never even mentioned the shot that had silenced the range. But silence is its own kind of power. The others saw it in the way instructors paused when they passed her name on the roster. In the way morals had stopped mocking and started watching, protective, almost reverent. She hadn't asked for any of it. She carried it the way she carried. Her rifle, steady, unshaken, as if it were simply part of her now. And yet, beneath the surface, a storm brewed. The colonel could not escape it. Every day, his eyes were drawn to her. He told himself he was studying, evaluating, ensuring she wasn't just a trick of circumstance. But deep down, he knew he was waiting for her to falter, to stumble, to remind him that she was still mortal. But she didn't. In obstacle courses, she climbed faster. In endurance runs, she lasted longer. At the range, she struck truer, and all the while, she remained silent. It was the silence that gnawed at him most. Other recruits celebrated small victories, groaned under failure, laughed when the day finally ended. She gave nothing, not indifference, something else. As if she lived in a world apart, where noise meant little and results meant everything. The colonel hated and respected it in equal measure. One evening, under a bruised purple sky, the colonel called the recruits to the field. The sun bled over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dirt. They stood in formation, sweat clinging to their necks, eyes darting nervously toward him. He let the silence draw out before speaking. You are not soldiers yet. You are fragments, broken pieces waiting to be forged. Some of you will not last. Some of you will fail. But among you, his gaze swept across the line, and for the briefest second, locked on her. are those who may one day be more than what even I can see. The recruits shifted, whispering faintly. He had never spoken like this before, not with a faint note of possibility. And though he didn't say her name, everyone knew who he meant. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She simply stood, silent as always, the weight of unspoken truth hanging around her like a cloak. That night, Morales approached her in the barracks. His voice was quieter than usual, stripped of bravado. "You know what that meant, right?" he asked. She didn't look up from the rifle she was cleaning. "He was talking about you. Everyone knows it." Still, she said nothing. She pressed a cloth along the barrel, her movements precise, deliberate. Morales sighed, shaking his head. "One day, you're going to have to say something. People need to hear it from you, not just see it." But she gave no answer, and perhaps she never would. The colonel, alone in his office, stared at the notebook again. The words he had written, "She changes everything," seemed to glare back at him. He poured himself a drink, though he rarely indulged. The liquid burned down his throat as he sat in silence, wrestling with thoughts he could not name. She was not just a recruit anymore. She was a mirror, a reminder of what he had once believed soldiers could be, before bureaucracy, politics, and years of disappointment dulled his vision. She reignited something in him he had thought long dead. Hope. But hope was dangerous. Hope made you hesitate. Hope made you vulnerable. And yet, he could not extinguish it. The final day of training approached. Graduation loomed, a day when recruits would either earn their place or be sent home. Tension crackled in the air, thicker than gunpowder. On the morning of the test, the colonel addressed them one last time. "This is not a ceremony," he said, his voice sharp. "This is judgment. Today will decide if you walk forward as soldiers or if you crawl away as failures. Remember this, the battlefield does not forgive. Neither do I." The recruits saluted, their faces pale but determined. When her turn came, the colonel's eyes followed her every move. He had no doubts left about her skill. He knew she would not fail, but he still searched, desperate for some flaw, some human crack in her armor. None came. She completed every task with the same quiet precision she had shown since the beginning. Her performance was not loud, not flashy, but it was undeniable. When it ended, the colonel dismissed the recruits. Cheers erupted, laughter spilling into the air as relief broke over the group. But she did not cheer. She simply stood in silence, her rifle at her side, her eyes steady on the horizon. Later, when the field was empty, the colonel approached her. His boots crunched softly against the gravel. She turned her head slightly, acknowledging him but saying nothing. For a long moment, he said nothing either. The air between them was heavy with things unsaid. Finally he spoke, his voice lower than the recruits had ever heard it. "You are never just a recruit." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something that almost looked like recognition. The colonel inhaled. "Slowly, whatever you are, whatever you'll become, it's beyond even what I imagined. Remember this, skill can win battles. But silence, your silence commands respect. Use it well." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked away, his shadow stretching long across the ground. Behind him, she remained still, the rifle cradled in her hands, her gaze fixed not on the colonel, but on the distance, on the future. In the barracks, the recruits celebrated late into the night. Morales laughed louder than anyone, slapping backs and retelling the story of her impossible shot for the 100th time. The others joined in, exaggerating, embellishing, turning fact into legend. But she sat quietly, her hands resting on the rifle across her lap, her eyes distant. Because she knew the truth. The shot that had silenced the colonel was not the end. It was only the beginning. And somewhere deep inside, she felt it. The unseen future was waiting. A future where her silence would echo louder than any gunfire.